It's time to get into the nitty-gritty business of talking strategy. The number one way to improve your game is learning how to use shields efficiently. Shield usage separates new players from the elites. Everyone only gets 2 shields, so they are your most valuable resource. At its most basic level, the overall goal is to only block moves that are going to hurt you the most while ignoring moves that aren't going to put you in danger. This is a skill that is situational and requires practice. However, there are 3 basic shielding strategies that we can employ to immediately improve our game. The first skill we need to learn is determining which charge move our opponent is going to use. To do this successfully, you need to think in terms of energy. Being able to recognize which charge move your opponent is attempting to use against you is a skill that develops over time. But, to make it simple, the longer they are taking to charge their move, the more powerful move they are attempting to send your way. There are a couple ways players can track how much energy your opponent is storing up. The simplest way is to keep track of how much energy you are gaining. If you're getting close to being able to afford your most expensive move, it is reasonably safe to assume your opponent is within the same range. The next method is your 6th sense. After playing certain Pokemon a couple of times, you will develop a sense of timing in your head, giving you a surprisingly accurate estimate of when the Pokemon you are facing will be charged up. This method requires a bit of practice and facing that Pokemon in the past, but once you have that sense, you can play comfortably by feel. The most experienced players will actually determine how much energy a Pokemon has by recognizing the specific fast move based on its animation, and then counting how many are being used so that they know exactly when a charge move will be ready and in turn which charge move is being used. If you are able to determine which specific move your opponent is trying to use, it becomes very simple to determine if shielding that move is worth it. The second skill we need to learn is to determine which of our Pokemon we need to reserve shields for. This is why earlier I put such an emphasis on our Pokemon's role within our team. If we know its role, we can determine if that Pokemon has completed its job. If it has, then it's okay to take a big hit and let it go. At least your opponent just burned their energy and you saved yourself a shield. Remember, we only have 2 shields, so sometimes letting one of your Pokemon go is the best decision you can make. If the Pokemon being attacked is a Pokemon that you know you need for later because it hasn't had the opportunity to fulfill its role, then you may need to use a shield to preserve a useful tool. Every time your opponent sends out a Pokemon, we need to assign the job of taking out that enemy to someone within our team. Thinking about it this way will further help us determine if our Pokemon has completed its job. Once your Pokemon has completed its job, then it's foolish to continue to feed it shields. Not all of the Pokemon on our team will receive a job, and potentially, one Pokemon will receive 3 jobs. In this case, we now know that both of our shields shall go to the Pokemon with the most jobs. The best way to get better at choosing when to shield correctly is something that only practice and experience can make perfect. But I hope that by thinking about shields in these terms will help give you a jump start on your competition. The final skill is actually an offensive strategy. Shield pressure is invaluable to your team. Being able to waste your opponent's shields before dipping into your own pocket is going to put you on the winning side more often than not. Simply put, sometimes the best way to save your shields is by wasting theirs. There are 2 ways in which we can accomplish this goal. Congratulations! If you have been paying attention so far, the first one is already complete. Pairing high energy gain fast moves with low energy cost charge moves is the best way to take your opponent's shields from them. The second strategy is called shield baiting. Shield baiting is always risky and only works in a situation where your opponent is experienced and knowledgeable about skill number 1, meaning that they know which move you are going for. To pull off this maneuver, we need a Pokemon with 2 charge moves, a cheap, quick one, and an expensive, high damage dealer. You will threaten your opponent with the hard-hitting move by charging it all the way up, but then use the cheaper, weak move. Doing this can potentially gain you 2 advantages. First, your opponent may shield thinking that the hard-hitting move is on its way. Second, you've only spent part of your total energy. This leaves you with some leftover energy to get back to that hard-hitting move much more quickly than before. Once you become masterful over shielding and controlling your opponent's shields, you now own the battlefield. The game is now in your hands. You are in the driver's seat. Only you can stop you from being successful. We have nearly mastered every element of PvP. There's only one thing left to conquer: switching. Switching is the most useful tool you didn't know you had. Switching is so much more than an escape from a bad matchup. At the most basic level, switching is accomplished by clicking the arrow in the bottom right corner and then selecting a new Pokemon. Doing this engages a timer that counts down until you're able to switch again. If your opponent switches, it is important to recognize that now their Pokemon is still under the timer and is now what is called switch locked. You are guaranteed that whatever Pokemon is out there cannot escape battle. Take advantage of this by getting your best Pokemon on the field and picking up a quick kill. On the flip side, if you get switch locked, avoid damage by running down your switch timer after one of your Pokemon has been defeated. Before you send in your next Pokemon, simply wait. Don't send in the next Pokemon until the countdown at the top is nearing the end, because at the same time, your switch timer below is also running down, meaning that you won't be taking damage and running down the switch timer. Be aware that by running down your own switch timer also runs down your opponent's. Another use for switching is to save you a shield. Earlier in our shielding conversation, I talked about how important it is to know when a charge move is coming your way. If you get good enough at this technique, then you can save yourself a shield by waiting until your opponent's charge is about to be triggered. At this point, if available to you, switch into your tank or a Pokemon that can eat that hit for you, saving you a shield and health. A quick tip is that you can pull up your switch menu while tapping. Your fast moves will continue to count while also being ready to immediately switch. The only downside to having your switch menu open is that you cannot trigger your own charge move. So before pulling it up, be certain that at some point before your next charge move is when you'll want to switch. Another tip is that you are able to open your switch menu and select a Pokemon to switch into after you or your opponent has triggered a charge move. One of the most difficult positions to be in is what to do if you have a bad matchup off the start. Now, there are a couple ways in which we can work our way out of this situation. First, we need to decide if you need your lead for later in the battle. Sometimes it's best to save your shields and let it go, or maybe you can win the match if you burn shields. If you decide that you need to preserve your lead and need to switch, there are two options. First, switch into something that can win but isn't a hard counter, hoping that its typing is safe from a counter switch. Second, switch into something that's a hard counter and be prepared to lose it. By doing this, you'll be able to deal massive damage to your opponent before they have the opportunity to switch themselves. If you do this, you should expect your opponent to switch into a hard counter. If your opponent switches into a soft counter, then play it out and try to deal as much damage as possible. If, in worst case scenario, they switch into a hard counter, then I recommend saving your shields and sacrificing your switch Pokemon. By allowing that Pokemon to die, it gains you two advantages. 1, you will be able to select a new Pokemon to send into battle, and 2, you will be able to run down the switch timer and get 2 switches, putting yourself back into the driver's seat of the match. Becoming confident with your switches and recognizing how to play out of bad matchups is important to our growth in becoming elite PvP players. Once we have mastered all the individual elements of PvP, we can begin putting them all together, from choosing our teams, moves, playing smart with our shields, to switching and avoiding dangerous positions. With the tools we have discovered along the way, we have all the fundamentals more than covered. You now have all the resources necessary to become a champion. So get out there, battle, and more importantly, win.